Ladies and gentlemen, today is a brand new day, you know what I'm saying? Your boy C-Jack's gonna be talking about some MCU, some Marvel, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, I just saw Thunderbolts a few days ago, and I have to admit, even though the movie wasn't bad, it also wasn't great. And it's time to start understanding that no matter what movie comes out within the next year or whatever the heck with Doomsday and Fantastic Four, the MCU is in shambles. Now, obviously, phases 1 through 3 were absolutely awesome. There were some stinkers in there, don't get me wrong, and some elements of like Avengers Endgame have aged poorly. However, the MCU phases 1 through 3 had that magic. It had that sauce. It had that aura. It had that impact. The stories were connecting. There was an overarching narrative while also benefiting from personal stories for certain characters. Your RDJ Iron Man's being built up and basically creating the MCU. Chris Evans, Captain America. Thor, who had a little bit of a lull period, but he came back in Ragnarok and Infinity War and was great. And then he ended up being bad in Avengers Endgame, so there you have it. However, we had a more cohesive universe that actually had people excited and intrigued. You had an Iron Man 3 movie that was mostly filler that still made over $1.2 billion at the box office. Now, Marvel would be lucky to hit those numbers, even with fan service cameos out the wazoo. But the point is that the current state of the MCU is a disaster. And unfortunately, as great as the first 3 phases were, we have to look at what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future. So with that being said, let's go ahead and break down why I think the MCU is in shambles. Number one, we have to obviously talk about the last 5 years, which have been an admitted disaster. Marvel has admitted it. Kevin Feige just admitted it in an article. We have also the fact that Marvel and Disney themselves have discussed it inside of that article, and the conflicts with making projects and how things were rushed and just weren't good. The multiple flops, the low viewership on the shows. It's just been an absolute nightmare for Marvel over the last 5 years, and they've admitted it. You cannot give us 5 years of directionless garbage with no real end game to it. The projects have obviously been bad for the most part. They haven't been just mid. I'm sick of the narrative that these projects have been just mid. No, they've been bad. Just be honest about it. Ant-Man 3, garbage. Thor 4, garbage. Doctor Strange 2, a little bit below mid, but not the worst. I'll give you that. Eternals, garbage. Black Widow, garbage. Shang-Chi, decent. You have all the other movies that were coming out and all the shows. She-Hulk, garbage. Miss Marvel, haven't even watched it, but guess what? Garbage. Secret Invasion, haven't watched it. Guess what? Garbage. You know what I mean? It's the same thing over and over again. They've been boring and they have no real significance. And because of that, it sets the precedent for what I'm about to talk about next. The fans are part of the issue. They glaze every single new project, which ruins the expectations going into it for many other fans, and sets the precedent to accept garbage, which is set up in phases 4 and 5. If every single one of those projects I just named off is going to get called good or great, regardless of what's actually happening inside of the movie, it actually being objectively not that good, we're going to continue to get more of the same slop. If the fans were, outraged at this garbage from the very beginning, we probably would have started course correcting in like 2023. But instead, we have to wait 5 years to get things back on the right track. And even then, we don't even know if it's on the right track. We still have to see what happens in Fantastic Four, and obviously with Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. Like the fan narrative of "we're so back, the MCU is cooking, we are so back, guys, this is peak, this is awesome." If it was so awesome, why in the world are the movies not getting watched by anyone? And why in the world have they been so objectively not that good over the last 5 years? So much so that Kevin Feige, the dude producing the movies, helping make the movies, and even Disney and Marvel themselves are saying they're not good. It's unbelievable, man. I don't know how the fans can sit here and call every single project peak as the MCU slowly dives into the dirt face first, but somehow we're told that this content is allegedly amazing. It makes no sense, and the standards have dropped so low that anytime a movie is just average, because if the Thunderbolts dropped in phases 1 through 3, no one would be calling this movie a top 10 or top 5 MCU movie. That's just egregious at this point. But because the standards have dropped so low, an average/decent movie like Thunderbolts gets pushed up to like a 8.5, 9 out of 10 by the general public. It is embarrassing. The next reason that the MCU is in shambles is simply because of the fact that all of the current roster of new characters they built in the last 5 years are jobbers. They're all trash. They can't draw, no one has any type of intrigue, and no one brings in viewership to the MCU. Just think about this, for example. Iron Man 3, like I mentioned before, over $1 billion. That movie is a filler movie. It has a decent story to it. I think the movie's kind of, overhated, I would say, but the movie's a filler movie in the MCU. There's There's no actual reason that movie should be outgrossing your fourth Captain America installment, or your fourth Thor installment, or your Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, the center, the basis of what your next saga is going to be about in the multiverse. And that movie did absolutely nothing compared to Iron Man 3. That just goes to show you how much bigger draws they had back in the earlier days of the MCU, and how people were actually intrigued to see everything that the mainline MCU characters were doing inside of their movies. Nowadays, you have Yelena Belova. The Thunderbolts movie opened worse than Captain America Brave New World, which bombed at the box office. Sam Wilson is not a draw. It's as simple as that. Shang-Chi is not a draw. We haven't seen him in 4 years, number one. And number two, there's this dude hasn't done anything since. Nobody's actually, like, for example, if Shang-Chi, Sam Wilson, Yelena Belova, She-Hulk, for example, right? Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop, etc. You know what I mean? If they never showed up again, let's just say they didn't show up in any of these Doomsday or Secret Wars films or Fantastic Four or even Spider-Man 4. I don't even know why they would be in that movie in the first place, but still, let's just say they never showed up. You would not care in the slightest. Nobody cares. If any of these characters never appeared again, it wouldn't matter. Adam Warlock, if he never shows up again, no one cares. Nobody cares. And let's just say that Ghost or John Walker from Thunderbolts didn't appear ever again. Would it matter? No. No one cares. If Dee Fontaine from Thunderbolts ended up dying in the next Marvel movie, would anybody care that she never comes back? No! Nobody cares about these characters. And evidently, the only big successes for the MCU box office-wise, and, an overwhelmingly positive reception along with a positive amount of viewership, like a lot of people watching it, have been your Guardians 3, your No Way Home, your Deadpool 3. Even though I think Deadpool 3 was absolute garbage, at least the movie brought in a ton of viewers and actually entertained people. Heck, it entertained me to an extent as well. The characters built in these different eras of Marvel, these better trusted stories, these trusted characters, with your Guardians that have been around for nearly a decade, or over a decade, I guess, at this point. Your No Way Home, you have Toby and Andrew showing up, absolute legacy characters that, honestly, Toby and Andrew, they're really the main selling point of No Way Home, and they weren't even in any of the trailers or anything revealed for this film. It's as simple as that. The nostalgia act, the cameos, the fan services, the characters that fans know that they can trust in these situations and trust for good content, those are the characters that end up getting over, and those are the characters that make you those $1.5+ billion type of movies. You think that anything that has Yelena Belova as the main character or Sam Wilson as the main character is actually going to do well at the box office? No one cares about these characters, man. If you can't make us care about the characters, then it does not work. And this leads me to my next issue. The Avengers multiverse saga, whatever they want to call it, is absolutely rushed. Infinity War and Endgame had a deserved build-up. We got backgrounds of all the interesting characters. We saw multiple different solo films for multiple different characters. We laid the groundwork for the story narratives. We laid the groundwork for Thanos as the villain way beforehand. And we got to see Easter eggs and post-credit scenes leading us to an eventual, Endgame. You know what I mean? No pun intended, of course, but that's what it was. We had an actual story that was, like I said, an overarching narrative that brought everyone together, and you also have the personal story setting up your individual characters. That way, when you got to Infinity War, you could jump right into the action and jump right into the story for that movie specifically. Build up Thanos, have Thor be the MVP of the movie, Iron Man's doing great things, etc. All these characters interacting is actually exciting. It's hype because you know where the characters are coming from. You've tracked their story. You have emotional investment in the storylines and in the characters, and in the end up, the climax of this 10-year-long storytelling arc. That is what you need to really build the end of a saga. This saga that we're in right now has none of that. We don't have multiple different solo films for the mainline characters in this phase, like a She-Hulk, or a Miss Marvel, or Yelena Belova, or Sam Wilson, or Shang-Chi, any of these jobbers. No one has any actual reasoning as to why we should be excited for Doomsday. The only reason we are, having any type of excitement is realistically because the X-Men are involved, we're getting Doctor Doom, and because we're going to see cameos and a bunch of fan service and interactions with older legacy characters. That is the main selling point of this movie. Nobody's hyped for this movie to see Shang-Chi, talk with Yelena Belova on how to beat up like an alternate version of an alternate version of like some jobber in the middle of New York. This isn't entertaining. Nobody cares about this. The only reason we're actually tuning in is because of the fan service, because of the nostalgia, because of the fact that all these characters that they're bringing in, the cameos, are characters from other eras. That's what the excitement is built off of. It's not built off of an overarching narrative and a personal narrative for the individual characters that have been built over the last 5 years. And we know that. The Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars is not earned. You cannot tell me that after the 5-year disaster we just got, that we're going to somehow get Thunderbolts, and then Fantastic Four, and then Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, all in the span of like a year and a half, 2 years. That is going to be rushed because it's built off of nothing. It's not built off of a solid foundation. And because of that, we now have no reason to actually be excited for these films. There's no legitimate build-up. There's no hype for any of this stuff. Let's be real with it, right? And nothing is earned. And because nothing is earned in the storytelling, no one's going to actually care for any of these newer characters when these movies drop. It's all going to be about RDJ's Doctor Doom, or if Deadpool and Wolverine show up, or if Toby and Andrew are involved, or what the OG X-Men are going to be doing, That's what we're really looking at. The actual movie themselves, the actual characters themselves that have been built up recently, nobody's watching for them, and that is a massive, and I mean massive, issue. And like I mentioned just now, skipping to 2 huge Avengers movies in this quick of a time span is not going to work. How is that not going to be rushed? And what is this movie even based off of? What are you going to market this movie off of? Oh, well, Doctor Doom showing up. Okay, what else are you going to market it off of? Let me guess. Cameos? Fan service? 2000s characters showing up? Is that what we're marketing it off of? Why don't we market it off of the current characters? Oh, right, because if you do, no one's going to watch the movie. That's pretty much the problem and the crux of the entire argument. You have to have a way to not only generate fans' intrigue back because Marvel has done irreparable damage to their reputation. You cannot have a situation where a 4th installment in a Captain America franchise is somehow grossing like less than $500 million. That is unacceptable. It's 2025. The ticket prices are dang near like double what they were even 12 to 15 years ago. So how in the world can you not even get half of what you used to be getting? It just shows you how less hype and how less interested the general public is in the general audience, and even Marvel fans themselves are in the current products of the MCU. And because of this, it makes a case for the MCU being in complete and utter shambles. Now, with that being said, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thought I'd give you guys a little bit of a dosage of Marvel today, you know what I mean? Might do a double upload later and, throw up some stuff about Backlash, or, as I call it, Back Trash, which we'll discuss at a later date and time. But with that being said, I thank you guys so much for watching. I thank you guys so much for your support. Have a phenomenal day. Peace out and one love.